listen to the other members, but I would just like to have a little bit more clarity on this. We can do this, you can have more clarity on the next contract for the city manager or city attorney or city, where we put this in there specifically in their contract. But we can also include in the personnel manual that we would like that you work every day from 8 to 5 or longer, whatever it takes, as you're an exempt employee. We expect to see you here every day. We want the visibility of the people that we have, and that scope of authority is very important in the community. Extremely important. I'll wait and see what everybody else has to say.
Anybody else have anything to say? Go
I
ahead.
do think it is very important to be here 8 hours a day for, for the really important people to be here. If we have any kind of questions or whatever, of course, we're not available because we don't have to be here every day. But then who do we call? If they're not going to be, if they're going to be only working for a few hours, I don't think it's right. I do agree with Mr. Varona. They are supposed to be here 8 hours a day.
But just a point of clarification
Yes, go ahead.
to Councilwoman Melendez Lopez here. It's not that the city manager, the city attorney, or the city clerk, they're not saying that they're not available or they're having a day off. They're saying that because of the 50-50, I'm going to be here one day and I'm not going to be, but I'm available by phone or whatever at my home. They're still, they should be at home. And I don't mean by home being in Phoenix, Arizona, or in Flagstaff, Arizona, or in Payson, Arizona. I mean being at their home here at that time to make decisions, or in case they have to come back to the office. That's what I'm looking for. I don't want to have any implications here that this 50-50 deal, that people are at home and all they're doing is watching TV. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. And I take it that they're professionals and they're doing their work to keep this. I just think that that the city manager that could be here because there's practically nobody in the building itself. I just want to bring that up for clarity.
Go ahead,
I
Councilman.
mean, we always have to assume that everything is going to be done professionally. I think I've seen this in the city a lot where somebody's going to be working out of Tucson or somebody's going to be working out of Phoenix because they have meetings over there and whatever, and then they've put in a lot of hours into this, and so things change automatically and they say, well, we won't be there Friday or we won't be there Monday. So obviously we're looking for somebody who does the job. The most important thing is the job gets done, right? If the architect was good, it doesn't mean he's got to be there. He's got to be there to make sure everything is working. Everybody puts hours on it, but it could be the other way. So, like Councilman Verona said, right? As long as they're available and they're doing their job, whatever the job is, what are we going to say? What are we going to do? Do we have to have everybody here to make sure everybody's here from 8 to 5 every day? And if they have to leave somewhere else, what do we tell them? Well, we got to figure out what that's going to be. So, I don't know. It's always good to have people around. It's always good to have them there. We're not here 24 hours, 8 hours a day. I certainly hope we don't have to be here 8 hours a day. Sometimes it looks like maybe we should be here 8 hours a day, but we're not. Again, I think it takes a little thought kind of whole process. And again, what does everybody else do? Do I ever hear the stories of the city manager of New York or the mayor of New York not being there? I mean, it looks like the mayor of New York is on TV day and night, right? So I don't know what the correct procedure is, right? Again, we'd have to study it. I would like to find out. And we've never maybe done that because Nogales is so unique. We've never gone out to see what everybody else is doing because we do our own thing here. We're not interested in what everybody else is doing. And so maybe it's time we did look and see what everybody else is doing.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
let me respond to Councilman Isaac because his response is basically broad in general terms. I'm just talking about, and we're talking about, I'm sure the Councilwoman Lopez, we're just talking about what's happening right now with the 50-50 schedule. That's all we're talking about. That when everything's back to normal again, that he's up in Phoenix and puts some hours and whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the 50-50 schedule that has to do with COVID-19 and how that pertains to the work schedule of the city manager. That's all I'm talking about. That when we have something like this, that we do expect them still to work out. But if he wants to go on a 50, or you want to go on a 50, or you want to go on, there's no problem with it. As long as they come to the council and say, I would like to be also a part of the 50-50 deal. I'm going to do my job remotely, visually. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't want to set a precedence with any of these people that are responsible to us, that somebody else is going to say, come to another mayor and council and say, they let him do that. So why do I have to ask for permission? Because there's a different mayor and council that have a different view of how things should be. I'm talking about this. The people that work for us, probably with the exception of the city magistrate, they should come directly to us to ask us an agenda item that they want to be a part of the 50-50. That's no problem. Then we discuss it and we go on with it. But for those people, they report directly to us. The city attorney, the city clerk does not report to the city manager. They report to us. That's clearly in the charter. Clearly. And there was reasons why those individuals were directly responsible to the mayor and council. I just wanted to respond.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, in
I'm
agreement
not
with
sure if you were raising your hand or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
in agreement with Mr. Barona, and it's communication. Communication of your work ethics, of what the people, the three people that are bonded to basically the city council, as to what their direction is and what, I see it. John does a very good job, notifying us as to where, when he's not going to be in here and all that. But I think it's more putting into communication and again, like Mr. Rodona said, amending and putting instructions on the charter.
Was this just going to be discussion, or did you want to?
No, I'll make a motion, but I was
You're
just
gonna make a
waiting to see
motion?
if anybody else.
Is there
has.
anybody else? Vice Mayor, did you have anything to say?
Oh, I concur with the statements made by Councilman Barona and Councilman Maldonado, and Councilwoman Melendez.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to direct the city attorney to prepare for the personnel manual, that those individuals who are responsible to the mayor and council and directly appointed by the mayor and council, that there be a clear delineation of what is the definition of a work schedule.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, signify by, did you have
Just-
something else?
No, just under discussion, Mayor. This is not to say we're gonna go back and try to escalate and try to say to the city manager, we caught you. That's not about it. We just want clarity from here moving forward. That's what this is about. Not to backtrack ourselves or anything like that. This isn't an I got you. None of us want to work like that. That's all, Mayor.
That's
Thank
all? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Number 3, discussion possible direction to city manager re-establishing legal residency within city limits. Councilman Barona.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. We seem to be having some concerns all the time with the city manager as part of the employment agreement of when they become residents of the city of Nogales. So I just want clarity. Is today the city manager a resident of the city of Nogales?
Well, Mayor, members of council, there is a statute that I think is relevant here that gives some guidance. It's a statute from Title 16, I didn't bring it with me, but it's, I believe it's 593, and it sets forth rules on determining if a voter, if there's a voter challenge, if a voter is a appropriate resident of the precinct that they're trying, or the jurisdiction that they're trying to vote in. And one of the rules is when you're married, then your residence is where your spouse and children reside. So if there's a separation between the spouses, but the children are residing with one spouse and there's another spouse, then the residency for voting purposes is where the children reside. And so in that situation, I think it's informative. The charter does require the manager to be a city resident. And so if you apply that rule from Arizona statute, he can't vote here, so is he really a resident? And that's the question. And so I mean, and there was an understanding when the city manager was hired that he would establish residency upon the conclusion of the school year. And I'm not sure, but I think the school year has essentially concluded. So the question is, when will he be establishing residency within Nogales?
Well, with that point, with a letter, I think a letter would suffice to the city attorney to indicate that we were under the belief when the academic year concluded, and for our purposes here, we will use the conclusion of the academic year of being wherever the child or the children go to school, whatever that date was in May, that is the end of their academic year. And we just to send a letter to the city manager to say, we consider that conclusion to be May whatever it is. You can say May 30th, because I don't think anybody goes longer than that. And that we would like to make sure that you are a resident of our community by June the 15th. I think that's fair to me. But here again, this is not an I got you. We just want clarity of what's going on.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes,
a
go ahead.
question here. Mr. Massey, what the charter says that you have to be, or does it say your family has to be?
He has to be a resident of the city. The
Does it
city
make any
manager.
reference to the family?
It doesn't make any reference to the family. What I pointed out is state law makes reference to how you decide if a person has established residency for voting purposes. And so if you cannot establish residency for voting purposes, have you established residency pursuant to the requirement of the charter? My opinion and my advice is the two should be the same. Why would you make any distinction in that regard? So in order to establish residency for voter purposes, the family has to be residing within the city.
But Mayor, that's another point of clarification for those of you who are going to continue on in January and you come up with a city manager agreement. Make sure you define residency as to ARS, whatever it is. Then you bring clarity in the contract itself. That's all.
Okay. But you want anything else? But
No,
is there anything else? Anybody else?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to direct the city attorney to go ahead and write a letter to the city manager on behalf of the mayor and council to indicate to him what day that he was going to establish legal residency, define legal residency into the letter, that we will add that for our purposes, we consider the end of the academic year to be May 31st. So then there's no doubt that there's flexibility there. We've given it plenty of time. I don't know of a school district in Arizona that goes to May 31st. But
Go ahead.
Again, Mr. Mayor, again, I'm going to be voting no, simply because this opens up a lot of can of worms. First of all, what if you're divorced? What if your family, for hospital reasons, reasons has to remain somewhere. You know, what if you have a house in Nogales and a house in Tucson, and you decide to say that your main residence is in Nogales? You can also say my main residence is in Tucson, right? If you have two houses in Nogales, you can say I live here or I live there. So I don't know. As long, my opinion is, and this I think has come up before. This has come up before with other city managers as to whether they stayed in Tucson, stayed here, were actually right outside the city limits or within the city limits, whether they lived here or all this has come up tentatively before. No clarification completely has been given. Again, I take it because other people have kind of given the same thing, that as long as he's living here, or whoever, is it a man or a woman, whoever is the city attorney or the city manager or the city clerk or whoever needs to live inside city limits, we don't do that for the police, we don't do that for even though at one time the charter specifically stated the police have to live inside the city limits, the firemen have to live inside the city limits. So again, this opens up a huge can of worms. I would like to either have a study session on it, have other opinions on it. What does other cities say about it? I would like to have all these things clarified before I go ahead and say, let's push it to another level.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to respond to Councilman Luciano. If I'm not, the statements that he's made would have been appropriate when he voted for the contract with the city manager, because it was on the contract there. We all voted that said that he had to be a resident of the city of Nogales. I'm just asking the city attorney, what is the definition of residency? If the city attorney would say he only has to be here, fine. I got my answer. I think right now the city manager does live within the boundaries of the city of Nogales, and he's waiting for his family to arrive. But what we're looking to what other cities do, or looking for a resource with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, or looking for a resource with the National League of Cities, we're not trying to complicate things. I'm just asking, how do we determine that the city manager is a legal resident of the city of Nogales, which the city manager agreed and we agreed in the employment contract that he would. That's all.
Anybody else?
Quick question for Mr. Massey. As far as the Arizona revised statutes, your voting place is your place of residency. So are we real clear on that definition on what the city manager has to do? Does he have to have his own family? Because he could have his residence here and he could vote here in Nogales. What about his family? Maybe his wife votes up in Phoenix. There's that's. I think we need to be 100% sure before we start making motions and stuff.
Go ahead.
Mayor and members of council, I think the rules from the Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 16, when it comes to how a person qualifies to vote, it does contemplate that situation where spouses could be separated. Usually, obviously, the separation is temporary, but you have to be able to determine where your real residence is. And under the Arizona Revised Statutes, when there are obviously two spouses and the children reside with one of the spouses, and the residence of the other spouse is also the home where the children reside. So you could not vote in a place where you're only temporarily residing. You have to only be qualified to vote in one place only. And when you're married and you have minor children, the place where you're qualified to vote is the home where your minor children reside.
Mr. Mayor,
Just go ahead.
I'd like to respond to Councilman Diaz. If there is something that, like you indicate, there is a remedy, and the remedy is in the contract. The city manager, the city attorney, all they have to do is say, could you please at this time consider my residency at this address, I cannot bring down my wife, child, or children at this time because of these personal problems, could you please consider it? And we would take it up right here. There is a remedy. All he has to do, like I've said before, is write, put it in writing, tell us, and then we can discuss it, and we can say, you know what? For our purposes, this situation, we consider this your residence. Now, you can't vote here, that's a different thing. But for our purpose and the contract, he can meet it like that. So he has a remedy. All he has to do is write us and tell us that it can't happen, and we will address it.
Mr. Mayor? Councilman Barona? So what you're saying is he really doesn't have to bring his family here, or he does have to bring his
No,
family?
he does, for the legal definition, from what I'm interpreting of Mr. Massey, he does have to have his family living there. But let's just say something happened that he couldn't bring him down, for whatever reason. All his remedy is, write us a letter. I would like to change the contract to say that me living here alone within the boundaries of the city of Nogales should be considered residency as far as the contract. And if we say yes, it's yes. It's our contract with whatever individual. We interpret it how we want to. I'm asking for a legal interpretation. That is the legal interpretation. If we don't want to accept that legal interpretation, and four of us say, no, we're not going to accept that interpretation, we're going to say he can stay here by himself, we don't need his family here, they got to take care of some other family emergencies, fine. He's met the legal requirement.
So, go ahead. So when Mr. Johnson accepted the contract, he knew about all this going forth with the contract, right?
Well, in fairness to Mr. Johnson, he knew that he had to be a legal resident. I don't know if we all knew what the definition of a legal residence was, okay? We have had problems with that, with, like Councilman Henestian alludes to, with other city managers, okay? And by the time we get to them, they take off. But yes, no, I shouldn't say yes. We signed the contract. It wasn't in the employment agreement. But there's always that clause. We can write to him to change the contract, and he can write to us to change it.
So it's really
It's a very-
it's something simple to do.
That's right.
No big deal, right?
And
Something like-
everybody should be very professional about it, understanding about family environments. And I think every one of us here,
It's not going to cause hardships on
Right.
anybody.
We're
Right?
not.
That's right.
we just want clarity, because we
Yeah.
got to start bringing clarity, because as new mayors and councils, we need to set a precedence now of how we do business. Because this
Go
thing is-
ahead.
That again, it leaves everything open to interpretation. So it's up to the mayor and city council if they want to do it or not do it. And everyone will be different, they'll have a different interpretation. All I'm saying is the charter, this has been brought up several times before, the charter states very clearly he has to establish residency in the community. Right? It doesn't say anything about the family. Then we're going to go ahead and ask the state, maybe let's ask the state before we do anything, let's find out. But as it is right now, as long as the charter says he establishes residency here, he's renting a place, he's living there, we don't want to, I don't feel that it's dictated as he has to be there 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 3 days a week. You know, I've had that we had one councilman that I questioned also, whether he lived in Tucson or Nogales. Well, he has a home in Tucson, has a home in Nogales. So where's the argument, right? I've had other people say the same thing to me. I have a home in Tucson, I have one in Nogales. What's the problem? Is there something illegal about that? There's nothing illegal about it. So as long as he establishes being in Nogales and so-called residency here, I don't know if that affects the family or not. That's an interpretation. So let's do that before we get into a big hassle in the whole deal. Let's find out what other cities do about it and what the legit interpretation is before we go to court to find out what the interpretation is and the courts clarify it. I'm sure it's already been done. Don't you think, Mr. Massey, that the courts have already clarified what it is?
Right, and that's what I pointed out, is that the statute is clear. The statute is clear. It's not a court, it's a statute. When you live apart from your family, you have non-established residency.
So in other words, if somebody moves into Nogales, his family's living in California. He moves to Nogales and he lives here, and he signs up to vote here in Nogales because he lives in an apartment here. Does he get to vote in Nogales?
Well, if he's challenged and that those facts are presented to a court, I think the court would apply the statute,
I'm sure it's already.
and he would not be able to vote.
Well, I'm sure it's been challenged, and so if you know it is, it's been challenged, let's find out, that's my only deal, right? I mean, if that's what the courts have ruled, then I have no problems, that's what the courts ruled, and I'm sure nobody will have a problem with it. But if it's gonna be left up in the air either way, if we go ahead and say, well, this is what we want, and somebody can go ahead and challenge us, then where are we? We're in the same situation as before.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, Councilman.
Councilman Hennessy is trying to make this a foggy issue. It's not foggy at all. We write this letter. If the city manager thinks that there is something that is not legally interpreted correctly by Mr. Massey, I'm sure, without any doubt, that the city manager will get himself an attorney to respond to that legal advice that we have gotten, and let him bring out the clarity and the case law that's involved with it, or court precedent. Let him bring it out. We don't have to do all of this research and all of that. We already have our research from Mr. Massey. If we write the letter to him and he's not in agreement, he has all the rights to not be in agreement. He can get himself an attorney and write us a letter and see where we go from there. Pretty simple. And if we have to go to court to get a final interpretation, we'll go to court and get a final interpretation.
Can we have a motion of this?
And what is the motion?
The letter.
I'll repeat.
Go ahead.
Yes, could you repeat it, please?
To authorize the city attorney to write a letter to the city manager to indicate when he will establish his residency within the city of Nogales, residency being defined according to ARS 60, whatever it is, and that for ourselves, we consider, as what he said, at the conclusion of the academic year, we consider the conclusion of the academic year to be May 31st of 2020. And if there are some, and you can add, Mr. Massey, if there's some extenuating family circumstances, please advise us.
Wasn't this always communicated on the contract?
Yes.
Yes, it's a contract.
And, you know.
The contract
there-
says that he has to be a resident, and then as part of the hiring process, an understanding was reached that allowed him to the end of the school year to
Yeah.
establish the residency.
That was what
Right,
he
yeah.
had commented,
Yeah.
that his family would not move until after the school year.
Yes.
We said fine.
Yes.
But again, the clarification is what the charter doesn't say that. The charter just goes ahead and says that he has to establish residency. And that's the question we're asking.
Right.
What does that mean?
But it
Right.
is told you.
Right. So what Councilman Hennessian is proposing is the word resident has different interpretations and different connotations in different locations. And so I think there's a clear answer in statute how a married person establishes residency. And so I think what Councilman Hennessian is saying is that the charter, when the charter uses the same word resident, meant something different. My suggestion is no, there's one definition of residency, and we go with what has been established by statute, and that has a specific meaning. You want the person's family here, that they really are a resident.
Okay. Do we have a second on this? We did? Letty?
Mr. Maldonado,
Yes.
is it the second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. I remember. We went back and forth with the residency. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I will be voting yes, but for the sake of clarification, strictly on that.
Okay. So it's yes. All right, thank you. Okay, on number 4 reports, I put this on the agenda myself, but seeing that I'm not going to get any response from this, and I don't need a response from the members of the city council or the city attorney on this either. This, I'm sure you all remember what happened, and Mr. Varona lived right in the middle of it. He was one of the persons that didn't have water for 2 days, 3?
50 hours.
50 hours. Yeah, so,
So that's why you.
so the thing is that, I'm just gonna say one thing. The work that was done on Sunday, Easter Sunday, was the proper work that was supposed to have been done on Saturday. Okay? So, I congratulate, Mr. Kissinger and the employees that worked on Sunday, Easter Sunday, to try to remedy the problem. But what happened on Saturday, I'm sorry, it was a total failure. 2 tanks emptied out, millions of gallons emptied out. They're not supposed to empty out. We have an alarm that goes off on the cell phone of the Public Works Director and other employees. That alarm tells you when the level of the tank is dropping. And when it's dropping, and the booster, you know the booster pumps are not picking up to fill it up, there is a problem. That means that the booster pump is trying to pump water to the tank, but it's got an outflow of twice the amount, which is a 16-inch line or a 24-inch line, whatever. My concerns were, why wasn't it stopped that night? If the tank is dropping, why don't you shut it off? You're already going to be without water, but you wouldn't have an empty tank. That's my concern. See, what happened is when they tried to recharge the tanks by bypassing it, it took all that amount of time just to get enough volume in the tanks to get gravity to some of the residents. That was the problem. That should have been taken care of on Saturday. If you don't want to do it from 1 to 5 or to 6 at daylight, you can go ahead and do it, and you probably wouldn't have emptied out the tanks. They created a lake with that 16-inch lines, and the other one went down the wash. Monte Carlo was without water. Nogales West was without water. The hospital was without water. Everything on Mariposa Road, Pachi Boulevard was without water. Across the railroad tracks on the top ridges of Hudgens, Summit, Soto subdivision, all that was without water. It was just a small section of the city with water and very little pressure. Let's not just think about this as a point of drinking water. I think about it as a point of an emergency, and I'm glad we didn't have an emergency. We had the virus, we had Easter Sunday, people at home, we're telling everybody to stay at home, and they can't even wash their hands or flush the toilet. All right? There was no need for us to be without water that long. I know exactly what they should have done, and they didn't do that. What they did on Sunday was the correct thing. But they decided to use the water to detect the leak. You don't use the water to detect the leak. You have a leak, guys. You have a leak. Shut it down. The booster pumps are not going to do anything. They know that they got to feed the tanks, but you don't have any gravity anymore. All right? They work. The tanks work like a tank in the toilet. They have a float. Tells you, you know what? It's running out of water. Do something. That's when you send your personnel out there. They could have sent the personnel at 2 or 3 in the morning and said, you know, something's really serious because we're dropping volume. Shut it down. They didn't do that. Next day, we have a lake. We have water running off, and then it took the guys a lot of hours to pump it out. And it took and I don't want to say, you know, there's a problem with that because I was elected by the people with 76%, gracias a Dios. But people were calling me. I stayed home, and I got calls, and I was contacting people, and I was in communication with John on this, and he was telling me what was happening. so I could relay that information to the constituents. Okay, that's what was happening on Easter Sunday. And I know some of you got calls. You got calls, I know.
Lots
And
of them.
Mr. Varona, well, this whole neighborhood was on them too. And I don't know, Hector, you didn't get a shortage, no, Hector?
No,
It didn't affect the Valle Verde, that's right, you're in Valle Verde, same as I am. I had water, but the thing is that I was continuously on the phone. And that's why it's so important to have leadership doing their work at the time in the city. And we lost one day, and my whole thing here, I'm bringing this back because I need to have the Public Works Director write up a report of how much water we lost, and not only that, but how is he going to remedy this in the future? What are your plans? You have to have some type of plan. Okay? If he doesn't have the employees, I understand they were looking for retired employees
Yeah.
to help out, just to know where the shut-off valves were at. And they found one retired employee that showed them where it was at. Okay, so we're missing a lot in that department. So that's all I want to say about
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned that it has an alarm. Who received the alarm notification?
that. The alarm should be detected at Public Works. They have a computer there that detects it. It also should be in their laptops and their telephones. The director and staff, some other staff, I don't know.
So there's a lot of people that received it.
John sent me the tanks. I don't know if you all received
No.
it.
Yes, I did.
If John could send it to us, I mean, he had it on his, but he probably got it from somebody at Public Works. But it shows you, you notice the ones that were in black? Those were the ones that emptied out. And then it would show you where the booster pump was going to try to boost it up. But see, a booster pump can't help you if it's empty. It's going to take a while to read, and that's why it took so many hours to do. And luckily, they did a bypass, and they were successful on it. And with the help of the fire department, and them working together, and with John Kissinger working on it and being on top of it, they were successful.
Mr. Mayor,
But yes,
have we had that problem before, and how old are those lines?
well, those lines are not old. They're not old, to tell you the truth. Everything on that area by the high school and the Mariposa and all that, if it's 20, 30 years maybe.
A little bit more, Mayor.
Yeah.
High school was open back in '82.
But we didn't have the tank. We didn't have the tank up there back then. See, so those lines, 70, 60, 70 years they're supposed to last. What was the break on it? I don't know.
81, 82
If it was, yeah, if it was, you know, and the strange thing about it, it's the same, basically the same flow, same line, and 16-inch, they both broke in two sections. So that's not common, but that's not the problem there. You're supposed to plan these things. You're supposed to have some type of a plan saying, you know what, if this was to happen to us, what do we do? How do we address it? And I think that Mr. Massey and I discussed that. I think that Public Works needs to work on that, so that if it ever happens again, they know exactly how to do it. So that instead of having 2-3 days without water, half in Nogales, just 8 hours or something like that. Well, because you know, we always find the leaks because the water is coming out in the middle of the street, you know. But the whole purpose here is you don't. And as long as I've been here, I've never seen these tanks empty out. Has anybody seen them empty out? That doesn't happen. This was like, it was cascading. It was cascading. But, and two. Yeah, and two. But I'll bring this back and later on, and maybe we can get to Mr. Barcenas to have a report and somebody that can talk about this. Okay, so.
I think it's important that we have it as a future agenda.
Yes, we will. So, make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Marcia, you're buying grapes.
Close.
Did they